members that serve as representatives of the community, the people and the businesses on their decision-making prowess. Pray that they work together amongst themselves to accomplish the good and the goals of the town and in relation to the amount of revenues and the expenditures represented therein. In your name we pray, amen.
Amen.
Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Noble. Here. Councilmember Ryder.
Here.
Mayor Dudley.
Here.
Councilmember Hott.
Here.
Vice Mayor Howell.
Present.
Manager Campbell.
Here.
Attorney Moore.
Present.
Well, welcome, everybody. First thing on the agenda is our fiscal year 2020-21 for public hearings. The first thing is Resolution 20-06, adopting the proposed millage rate for fiscal year 2020-21. Attorney Moore, read it in full, please.
Happily, Mayor, Resolution 20-06, a resolution of the Town Council of the Town of Kent City, Pinellas County, Florida, proposing the millage rate for fiscal year 2020-21, providing for administrative compliance and providing for an effective date. Whereas Section 200.065 Florida statute sets out the method of fixing the millage rate by the governing body of a taxing authority. Whereas the Town Council of the Town of Kent City, Pinellas County, Florida, held a public hearing on September 9, 2020 at 6:30 p.m. to adopt the proposed millage rate as required by Florida statute 200.065. Whereas the Town Council of the Town of Kent City must set the proposed millage rate for fiscal year 2020-2021 to be used in computing the amount of ad valorem taxes to be raised to fund the tentative budget. Whereas the Town Council deems approval of this resolution to be in the best interest of the health, safety, and welfare of the residents and citizens of the Town of Kent City and the public at large. Now therefore be it resolved by the Town Council of the Town of Kent City of Pinellas County, Florida, that Section 1 pursuant to Section 200.065 Florida statute, the fiscal year 2020-2021 ad valorem millage rate for the Town of Kent City is hereby tentatively established as 5.4374 mils, which is more than the rollback rate of 4.9034 mils by 10.89%. The proposed millage rate of 5.4374 mils remains unchanged from the prior fiscal year. Section 2, the town clerk is hereby directed to notify all pertinent governmental agencies of the provisions hereof as required by law. Section 3, this resolution shall become effective immediately upon approval by the Town Council of the Town of Kent City. This has been a full reading of Resolution 20-06, Mayor.
Manager Campbell, want to add anything before I give the motion?
Just briefly, Madam Mayor, members of council, the rollback rate in this particular case, for those of you that weren't familiar with the discussion from prior years, it's the act of applying the prior year's tax rate or the rate that would generate the same amount of property tax revenues approved for the prior year. So in this particular case, we are seeing a 10.89% increase in our taxable revenues if you apply our overall ad valorem that's proposed for this year in comparison to last year, because the town witnessed roughly an 11.5% increase in ad valorem values over last year to this year. So it's important to note that we're actually recommending that we maintain the same millage rate that we had from the prior year and not increasing that at this point. And as referenced on page 21 of 90 of your revised budget document, I want to point your attention to the maximum millage levy calculation spreadsheet. It's known as the DR 420 MMP, and this was a document that was circulated on Friday of last week that's in addition to your DR 420 form, which was previously provided that indicated the certification of taxable value. This form looks very similar to your certification of taxable value, but up at the top it says maximum millage levy calculation. Please kind of nod your heads when you get to that point.
What page is that?
It's on page 21 of 90 in your revised budget packet. So it will be behind tab 6.
Got it.
And if you go through tab 6, just to help you. You got it? Yeah. Okay. The first one is the certification of taxable value. I want to draw your attention to basically line 4 and line 15. These are the two. This form is put together by the Florida Department of Revenue, and it's a formatted form where the town fills out this form with the proposed millage rate, In this case, we input the prior year operating millage rate in line 4, which is the 5.4374. And then we input under line 15 the current year proposed millage rate of 5.4374. Does everyone see that line? What's important to point out is, in this particular case, for this decision this evening, if you look at line 16, the minimum vote required to levy the proposed millage, notice it checks 1, it automatically indicates item B when we fill in our proposed millage that specifies 2/3 vote of governing body, check here if line 15 is less than or equal to line 14 but greater than 13, and the maximum millage rate is equal to the proposed rate. Even though we're asking to maintain the same millage rate as the prior year, which that would seemingly be harmless because of our ad valorem increase in property values, we still need a 2/3 vote of the governing body, which that means if you round 2/3 up, it's like 3.3. So theoretically, you need 4 out of 5 council members to adopt the same millage rate that was adopted as last year. Does that make sense? Okay. I wanted to point that out. And then the truth in millage documents, these are the statements that are mailed to the property owners. In order for us, and this is just for future reference, in the event that we want or consider making a proposed adjustment to the millage in future out years, the actual deadline to get a proposed millage increase to the property appraiser for submittal out to the residents in their truth and millage statement documents is August 4th for an August 24th mail-out date. So theoretically, if we're considering a millage increase in future years, we'll want to have probably a millage discussion workshop in July, mid to late July of next year, to consider looking at millage. When we originally put together the budget this year, based upon everything that we had, this year was a very interesting year because of the pandemic. We originally were supposed to have all of our data from the property appraiser, by middle of June. We were still getting material from them as late as August 20th, which made it a little bit difficult with our overall projections. So just in the future years, it'll probably cause us to start our budgeting process a little bit earlier so that we can get you the budget document and we can talk in workshop fashion if the council is interested in doing millage increases in future out years. Does that make sense? That's just a general education. So the trend notices have already gone out with the proposed millage as indicated in the subject resolution of the 5.4374. And at this point, I'll open it to discussion amongst council. Thank you very much.
Okay. I first need a motion to approve it. Doesn't mean that we're all agreeing, it just we can have for discussion. So I need a motion to approve resolution 20-06.
I make a motion to accept.
Okay, I need a second. Okay, now, open for discussion. Anybody have any questions or comments? I'm fine with where we're at.
We
said
gotta
that
do what we
was
gotta do.
what we were doing, and I definitely don't want it to increase, but I'm good with where it's at.
I mean, I ideally would like to compromise somewhere between the rollback rate and the proposed rate, but I know that our budget depends on that current rate.
items in our budget that goes up a certain percent. And we have to keep up with that.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, you're chasing it. And that's why periodically you're gonna have to just continue with the, millage increase every so often.
Well, at least we're not increasing, it's just maintaining the same as last year right now.
Yeah.
So, like I said, it's just a technical increase because of our property values.
Okay. Anything else?
You know, just going through our, actual expenditures, so for instance, public safety last year was 2% under. General government was 0.001 under. Highways and streets was 2% under, but then miscellaneous, which falls under general government, was 2% over. And I think we need to get a much tighter handle on our spending throughout the year. So we are, I mean, you know, so when we're going over our budget, we can have an actual, and we actually know what our expenditures are, you know, and what we might be going over, and because looking at some of the budget items, you know, for instance, like our, you know, the website's got like $12,000, and we spent $6,000 last year. To me, that seems like an extremely, you know, a lot of money going into things like that. You know, and stuff like that, and, you know, our contracts, they're kind of a no-brainer. You know, our contract is like, you're gonna increase it 0.03 to 0.05% every year for all of our contracts, so you can't get that wrong. You know?
Right.
I wish you could, but.
Yeah.
But I think we really need to focus on what we're spending money on, and we need to discuss it and make sure that, you know, we're all in agreement with the priorities of the town, because I think we really need to look at bringing our expenditures down. Like, for instance, if we would've had, you know, we would've used some of our, when we redid the building, some of our capital on solar. I mean, so you've got 72 for the town hall, 72, and then 12 plus $25,000 right there. You know, so there's a lot of ways that we could save money and improve the town, and I think we really need to focus on a lot of that kind of.
It's somewhat of an ongoing thing. I mean, you know, we've got the budget, we've got the figures. What you're talking about is in the process thereof, you know, going back and checking things and saying, what about this, what about that? You know, but as far as the budget goes. we
Well, I
got-
know what I'm saying, I want to do that because.
That's great.
You wanna monitor it more.
Well,
throughout
yeah,
the year.
because like I say, our biggest overage was general government, you know, and you go through, and this is the actuals that I'm going, you know, it's just not the budget. So I think that's really important that we start doing that a little more.
That's fine.
I'll open it for public comment.
Well, Fran?
I know, Fran. Open it for Fran. Okay, close public comment, poll the council, please.
Councilmember Noble?
Yes.
Councilmember Unitas?
Yes.
Mayor Dudley?
Yes.
Councilmember Hopps?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Howard?
Yes.
Okay, next is a resolution 20-07, tentatively adopting the budget for fiscal year 2020-21. Attorney Moore, read it in full, please.
Happily, Mayor, Resolution 20-07, a resolution of the Town Council of the Town of Kennett City, Pinellas County, Florida, tentatively adopting the budget for fiscal year 2020-2021, providing for administrative compliance, and providing for an effective date. Whereas Section 200.065 Florida statute sets out the method of adopting the budget by the governing body of the taxing authority. Whereas the Town Council of the Town of Kennett City, Pinellas County, Florida, held a public hearing on September 9, 2020 at 6:30 p.m. to tentatively adopt its budget for the 2020-2021 fiscal year as required by Florida Statute 200.065. Whereas the Town Council of the Town of Kennett City must annually adopt a budget setting forth anticipated revenues and expenditures. And whereas the Town Council deems approval of this resolution to be in the best interest of the health, safety, and welfare of the residents and citizens of the Town of Kennett City and the public at large. Now therefore be it resolved by the Town Council of the Town of Kennett City, Pinellas County, Florida, that Section 1, the Town of Kennett City's $5,266,362 tentative budget for the fiscal year 2020-2021 is hereby incorporated as part of this resolution and is hereby tentatively approved as the budget of the Town of Kennett City for the fiscal year ending September 30, 2021. Section 2, the town clerk is hereby directed to notify all pertinent governmental agencies of the provisions hereof as required by law. Section 3, this resolution shall become effective immediately upon approval by the town council of the town of Kent City. This has been a full reading of Resolution 20-07, Mayor.
Thank you. Manager Cameron, do you want to add anything before I get a motion?
You can get a motion, and if you will allow me just to kind of give a quick overview, and then
Okay.
we can go for it.
I
Thank you.
need a motion to, accept resolution 20-07.
Motion to accept resolution 20-07.
I need a second.
I'll second it.
Okay. Manager Campbell?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. Just to be brief, the general fund totals $2,929,362. The beautification, which is the old red light camera proceeds, totals $205,000. And the capital improvement plan fund totals, which is known as the CIP, totals $2,132,000. We're presenting a balanced budget that we workshopped on August 12th and August 26th. There was considerable critical thinking and thought that went into the discussion at the workshops. An extensive binder was provided to council, but then we updated that binder with information on September 4th. A number of staff have met with council. I've met with council throughout this process to attempt to answer some questions and provide clarification of the proposed budget. Briefly, the town budget as presented creates a bird's eye view of the town's finances. It's more or less if you can picture the Orlando Eye or the Coca-Cola Eye, it's a Ferris wheel that's constantly moving. We're stepping on and stepping off, but the Ferris wheel keeps moving, so to speak. That Ferris wheel is typically the budget year for the town. As mentioned in the last 2 years of budget discussions, we've indicated that there may come a time in the future when our overall expenditures potentially outpace our revenues. We were, for the most part, borrowing from reserves over the last 5 years to balance our overall operating budget, with the understanding that we didn't spend 100% of our individual line items in the budget. So when it came time for the town audit, we were borrowing a modest amount from reserves. As in the case of last year, we technically were on paper borrowing $260,000 in reserves to balance the budget at budget time. But then when we got down to the audit, it was down to roughly $42,000. What I'm trying to point out here is those were during what we would consider to be, I don't know if we know normal anymore. Those were normal budget times. With the arrival of the pandemic in the latter part of 2019, Kansas City is not alone in its overall difficulty in accurately making projections as far as the revenues and where they're going to be for future subsequent years, so on and so forth. The county's faced with this, other municipalities, the state, the nation, and the world. What we're trying to do is accurately project what it's going to take to continue to maintain our existing finances throughout the town moving forward. We do have more that we're borrowing from reserves this year. We started out our overall workshops with the overall goal of looking at healthcare spending and trying to reduce healthcare spending across the board for all employees, to try to save costs and provide a more cost-affordable plan for all employees, but still give the employees an opportunity to buy up to a more benefit-rich plan. We found out once we started going through open enrollment that there would be some heartburn with those overall recommendations, and that caused us to look at the economies of scale and use simple economics to try to come up with another means to potentially reduce that overall amount that we borrow from reserves by putting the money back into healthcare spending. Through those discussions, we found that, in reality, we did make recommendations. That what I'm trying to point out here is, as your town manager and as your staff, my goal is to make recommendations to you. You're the policymakers. You're the ones that ultimately decide whether or not we spend or not spend the items contained within this budget for the most part. My goal is to try to accurately project where we're going to be this fiscal year, the remainder of this fiscal year, next fiscal year, and on to perpetuity. In this particular case, with the pandemic, we honestly don't know. And when I ask other managers throughout the county, they scratch their heads too, and they say, listen, we're in trying economic times. One of my colleagues in Treasure Island, for instance, I've always asked her what her plans are, and she said moving forward, they move forward with no wage adjustments anywhere within preserved all their positions. So, you know, I use that as a basis and a guide moving forward. Other agencies that are a little bit wealthier, that have, you know, a viable downtown, that might have docks, waterfront, downtown parking, et cetera, or a parking generation model, as in the case of John's Pass Village, that they can rely on to fund entirely their general fund operating budget. We don't have the benefit of doing that, unfortunately. We have roughly 1,300 plus or minus homes that are modest, you know, single-family homes that we've seen this year a higher increase in value than any other year, and that's something to be proud of. We've got roughly 130 businesses. We just don't have a walkable downtown or any manufacturing or port or an airport to continue to generate or rely on for increased taxable value. So we have to get creative in future out years. So what I'm trying to say is the projections and the recommendations that are included in the budget, they're not personal. They're focused on dollar value estimates and recommendations. They don't have a name associated with them. We realize and respect that our largest cost center within the town is our police department, and we highly respect our police department. They put their lives on the line every single day for the people of this town, and we have done our best to provide financing for them to continue on with their resources. And we still want to preserve and protect the community, and we respect our police department from that standpoint. So, in reality, what we're putting together and what we presented was a recommendation. It's up to you as council on what you want to do with it moving forward, and we will implement whatever plan you have for us. So, other than that, the budget is balanced on all fronts. We have a sufficient amount of reserves as defined by the Florida League of Cities in order to balance any shortfall within the budget. What I'm explaining to you is now we have those reserves. We've had those reserves ever since I've been your manager. I'm not saying that if we continue onward with the pandemic that we'll continue to have those healthy reserves, but we're not in dire straits at this point, and we have the ability to borrow from reserves to balance our budget. So I just wanted to bring that forward. So I'm open for questions, obviously, and I appreciate your time and I appreciate your patience as we put together options for the town to consider. Thank you.
Okay, open for discussion?
Oh, go ahead, I'll let you go first.
You gotta probably say something. So I feel like a lot of this stems from the previous conversation last week regarding the police contract and the health insurance and everything. So ultimately, I mean, like, I would like to bring that to discussion to see how you guys feel about that. I heard that we all were brought in to discuss that. Whether, you know, I heard that changing the health insurance benefits was off the table, correct?
That cannot be unilaterally done by town administration.
Right, okay, so ultimately it's move the money from reserves to balance these changes, or as we discussed, we could eliminate a position in the police department through attrition.
That's the proposal from
That was
the town
the
administration.
That's just a proposal.
And that's what we're agreeing on here?
Well, okay, I need to clarify. The budget that you have in your document, it shows pulling the balance from reserves to balance the budget for all of those. The narrative regarding the elimination of the position through attrition is in the overall cover letter memo, and it's in the memo that updates the council on moving forward.
Okay.
Because the recommendation of doing it through attrition originally was a softer approach versus everyone drawing straws come October 1st and us doing something from that line.
Right.
Handling it just as a recommendation through attrition is if someone were to leave throughout the balance of the fiscal year, that position just would not have been filled. So theoretically, we have to fund that position if until such a time that vacancy occurs. So the money is still in the budget, just borrowing from reserves in a larger amount. Does that make sense?
Yes, but is there any kind of time frame attached with that?
Not right now, no, because in reality, our original recommendation was, and I've talked with some other managers in the area, that's the you know, like I said, it's just a recommendation, just moving forward.
No, I mean, I understand, like, you know, obviously it would be preferable to give another, you know, an officer time to find other gainful employment, which I'm not necessarily saying that. I'm just worried because the whole process takes 3 years for someone to leave and then, you know, we're not necessarily helping our budget. That's what I mean more by time frame, not necessarily kicking someone out the door. Just how do we protect, if it's really about the budget, how do we make sure that it doesn't go for like an extended period of time?
And that is a very good question, and, you know, it's something that we look upon past history within our overall police department. There's a huge demand for law enforcement officers throughout the entire county and area. We are not the highest paid agency by any standard. We have, most of the officers that we lost have been due to attrition of officers taking positions elsewhere. So that was what the overall focus was. So I get your point. It could be that we don't lose this position within the calendar year, and we just end up borrowing from reserves to cover that position. And then we look at doing that again in the next budget year. There's flip sides to this, because in reality, as far as the agency that we currently have, nobody likes eliminating a position, especially in a small agency like ours, because invariably, based upon our existing workload, it's still gonna create overtime deficiencies, et cetera. So it's not a pleasant recommendation on my part, and please know that it wasn't personal. It just was monetarily based as a way to offset what didn't happen with the overall healthcare expenditure. So is it an optimum situation? No, it's not.
I feel like that the situation with the healthcare was a big debacle, big misunderstanding. I don't think there was real clarity, and again, we're not pointing fingers at people, that some people assumed this and then somebody else just assumed that it was going to be what it had been in the past, and then nobody really knew what was going on until open enrollment occurred. And at that point, we almost were up against the wall and trying to come up with our options. I don't think there was enough time given to the PDA or to the police department to even discuss how they felt about it. I saw the email today, and that just shows me there was no communication in a timely fashion to address it. I agree with Manager Campbell that, you know, he's doing his job with the numbers and, you know, keeping us fiscally sound. I agree that's his job, but I believe that this council, we're the ones that put the humanity into it, and we're the ones that are looking at the big picture of the people, and not just the people as our employees, but the people in our community that we're providing service for. I have been here long enough to see when we are down officers and we don't have a full squad. And I know that causes the problems that Manager Campbell did address. We have overtime. Some of the problems I've witnessed are they end up, someone calls in sick, and then whoever is on that shift, they can't go home. And then they're working extra hours, and they're trying to get somebody to come in early for the morning shift. And I've seen the nightmares of the schedules with that. So I would like to see that we make note of the fact, okay, can we function as a town with one less officer? But I don't think now is the time to make that decision. I feel like Manager Campbell would need to present to us the plan of what that's gonna look like. How is that going to happen? And then the chief would need to also present a plan of how he thinks it will work or it won't work. To me, that's a workshop and somewhere down the road. I see in our notebook that Manager Campbell has told us that Florida League of Cities recommends three months for reserves, and we have 6. We have what we need to pull from reserves and make this work. And then we can put our paper and pen to the paper and, with a force of one less officer. I just don't think now during a pandemic is the time to do that.
You know, I agree and disagree all at the same time with some of the things you said. I mean, as you said, it is a pandemic, so they're gonna keep their 100% paid healthcare, which we pay everything for them. They're gonna get a raise and they're gonna keep their position. You know, my wife is a full-time nurse manager. HCA is a huge healthcare organization. As you know, many of our surrounding hospitals are HCA based. They sent out a notification. No one is getting annual reviews or raises this year due to the pandemic. And a lot of other organizations are acting that way. So if we're talking about, in the time of a pandemic, then I also think, you know, employees here, and I'm not even just talking about the police department, I'm talking maybe the town as a whole, when it comes to raises, maybe they should be happy that they have jobs during this time period, and maybe we can save some money there, especially if we would like to do your recommendation where we're not gonna cut a position right now. Okay, so say we don't cut the position now, but we save money by not getting a raise.
My turn?
Yeah.
So, I find one, and it's been stated up here, and that has been my theme since I've gotten up here, is there is no communication, period. I have sat there, asked about projects, I have asked about all kinds of stuff. So my first question is, what went out about our insurance, because this is like Christmas, it comes every year. What kind of communication went out? What was done to, look at other plans? It should be just easy to rattle off, you don't really need to write it down. What did we look? Did we go out and look to see if we could lower our plans? Why do we give dependent health care? Do we need, I would rather see that cut instead of cutting our employees or their health care. Because if people have children, they can go out and get Florida Kid Care, and it doesn't matter how much you make. And that way you can insure your kid, you know, it's step increments. And so, go ahead.
Okay. In this case, and I was writing down your questions because I wanted to make sure I got them, so if I missed anything, please remind me. In this particular case, we looked at all the plans that were available within the PRM, which is the Public Risk Management portfolio that's currently provided to the town for its employees. We have everything from the minimum standard plan, which was originally called the Obama minimum plan, on up to the benefit-rich plan that we originally were chasing for many years. We had everything in between, everything from a $550 plan on up to a $1,000 plan. Our overall goal in researching this was to stick with the PRM group, which is the public risk management folks, to provide our staff just with a lower cost or a more middle-of-the-road healthcare option, but within their overall plan. In doing so, I personally researched this last year because I originally started out with that benefit-rich plan, and I started thinking, well, I want to try one of these lower benefit plans that was around $750 to see if it was beneficial at all. So I actually enrolled myself in that over the last year and found out that yes, it has a deductible, right? The overall plan, the benefit-rich plan, or what we call the 55 plan, does not have a deductible at all. Most everybody that has healthcare plans has some sort of deductible. And I found out that if you are generally healthy and you don't have anything that's catastrophic, that deductible or not, you can generally get some coverage. But barring the overall catastrophic event, you know, staff stating, hey, open enrollment is actually going to be in the next week. Here's a list of all the plans. By the way, the town is proposing to reduce the overall contributions by $145 from the $920.27 down to $750. And we could have indicated that to them versus waiting until the open enrollment window and notifying them of the reduced amount, which ultimately we received feedback at that point. The clerk had indicated to me that upon talking with the police department that it was something that was a grievable offense if we went and touched healthcare expenditures. In this particular case, that was our notice deficiency. As far as the dependent care, that was something that was flushed out in, Madam Mayor, you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong. It was either the last budget year or the prior budget year, so it was either 2017 or 2018. In an effort, or it might have been 2018, 2019, I'll look back.
That's what I would have said.
But it was an effort to make ourselves a little bit more competitive with the benefits that we offer employees so that we could season positions because of the local labor market being fierce as far as our positions and our labor and cost analysis. So that was suggested at that time. It was voted upon by council to provide what we were providing at the time, which was roughly $400 towards the purchase of dependent health care coverage with the proviso that if someone elected dependent care, they had to get it through the town's health care provider, which was PRN. We did not offer a cash out option for that employee to go shop that elsewhere. Does that make sense?
It does, but, have you ever sent out a survey monkey to all of the associates and say, hey, you know, we don't have as much revenue? What benefits are most important to you? Because you offer them, so you have your starting pay, you have your insurance, you have dependent insurance, you also have a pension, you have life insurance. So put those together and, you know, do the math, see how much it all costs, and what's the most important. You know, have you ever done any kind of survey to your associates? Do you know?
We have not. We've just provided or accentuated what's been provided in the years since I've been with the town. We have added to that. We originally did not have life insurance for the employees. We did have dental, but there was no life insurance other than a modest amount. So we were able to negotiate a plan for all employees that gives them 1.5 times their salary or a total of, I think, $150,000 for life insurance versus $25,000 that we originally had.
Is PRM the only insurance company we can deal with?
Right now, we have 3 that we can deal with that are in the state of Florida.
Did we check their prices?
We have not actually gone out to the marketplace to see what pricing is at this point. We have considered doing that for future out years.
So we just decide to eliminate people and not go out and check prices of different insurance?
That takes time, and we did not have.
Again, it's like Christmas. We know when Christmas is gonna be here.
Right.
It's also my understanding that the contract with the officers of PBA, that this clause, the insurance, it's only 1 more year, right?
This is the last year of a 3-year negotiated plan, and this particular year was a reopener for wages only. And it's specifically outlined in their overall contract as for wages. It was not for benefits. I interpreted the section B in the overall contract to allow the town to research, and it's indicated in the overall labor PBA contract. I interpreted that to mean that we could go out, look at rates within our existing carrier portfolio, or eventually shop rates that were within the best interest as the town as a whole moving forward. And then there's a 30-day notice in there of the PBA. What had happened was when we sent the PBA a notice on the 8th, granted, our negotiations with them up to this point have been wages only. So it wasn't having to do with benefits. give them a courtesy email earlier this week and just ask them. What actually resulted in their frustration was I reached out to them today saying, hey, we asked you yesterday, we're just looking for a general idea. We kind of knew deep down inside that the PBA would not be willing to give away health insurance benefits if it's specifically outlined in the contract with a dollar amount. If it was specifically worded in a manner that health insurance shall be provided for all officers commensurate with the same benefits that are provided to regular rank and file employees, it would have been a lot easier for us to do that, but it actually was outlined as a dollar amount.
Right, but I was going with what Bonnie's saying, that we haven't really looked at all the options that we really could do, so that knowing that this clause in their contract is for 1 year, so if we deal with it now, we borrow from reserves, we're not gonna get rid of an officer, knowing that that's something that's on the table next year.
Right, I mean, because again, we need to all communicate, we need to do the research, because, I mean, here's in your budget, okay? General, office went up 18.8%. PD, and for insurance, PD went up 10.3, DPW went up 41%. I mean, and so all of a sudden, you know, we just, we're gonna get rid of a cop. I mean, that's a little harsh, and it doesn't make people wanna come to work. That's the bottom line, is you're giving our town bad morale. You know, when you look at the numbers, what you've done is just, I mean, you know, the numbers don't support what you're saying.
It's like anything, when you get rid of, it's hard to put back.
Oh, absolutely.
It's hard to put back. It's just like us with money and savings, and you pull it out for something and say you're gonna pay it back. It's hard to do. So we let one go, it's gonna be hard to put it back in the budget.
And then, you know, everyone's always, contract. So you drop down the PD budget to 1.2 and hope that we can get everything we get now, okay? So an average for your contract increase is 0.5%, 0.05%, 0.5. And so that takes it up $60,000 the first year, $63,000 the second. By the time you're up to the 5th year, you're at $72,000, $930 increase, which puts it up to 1.5, which is over our current budget. And that's not ever gonna go down, because then the police people around that you might contract with, it's gonna be, sucks to be you, what are you gonna do now? You don't have a police department.
You know,
I mean,
the way I look at this is you got so many apples coming in and so many apples going out. And the trick to success is how many apples you get to keep. Our control here is the tax increases and control of our expenses is the only way that we're going to do this, okay? The biggest thing that we have income is the tax, correct? Everything else that we have, we have a lot of other incomes, but when you're talking about major money, major pockets of money, it's coming from the tax, all right? Then you got the money going out. If this keeps increasing and increasing and increasing, this has got to increase also. This millage has got to increase, okay? It's like somebody who wins the lotto and they have $1 million in the bank, and they're going to live off of the interest that they make off of that $1 million. But in the meantime, they decide, I want a new car, and they take it out of the principal and they buy a new car. And then they say, I'd like to have a new house too. And they take it out of the principal and they buy a new house. The next thing, you don't have any principal. And that's what we're going to be doing if we don't start increasing the taxes and decreasing our expenses. We're going to run out of reserves.
so I understand that. So as I said when I started, public safety was 2% under budget this past year.
Right, and I say, he didn't spend all of his money, he turned money back in, and he's under budget this year.
And that's
He came in
actual,
under.
that's not a budget, that's actual, and I
Well,
did talk to the CPA.
That all goes in with what you were saying earlier about trying to control the expenses at a later date. Right now, we've got the budget, we voted on the budget, you know, we're at square one. We're at square one. From now on, we gotta continue on. How do we increase this? How do we decrease that? That's what we have to do, that's our job up here. You know,
Right, and we've gotta get the communication, because we can't have a one-person show running our town, because it's not working well.
Well, in order to have more than one person running our town, it would take more hats, and if it takes more
No.
hats,
We should be able to communicate and know what's going on in our town up here and be able to discuss it, go over our expenditures, make sure we're in line with the budget. That's what we're supposed to be doing.
yeah. Well, all that is a working process. It's in progress. You know, there's nothing we can do about it now except for agree that that's what we're going to do.
Well,
They were going to
he
look
did
at this.
say that there were some areas that he, you know, they faltered at. He did say that.
And we do things 2 and 3 times in this town, you know? It's like, oh, it's not right, oh, well, we'll just do it again. So we're spending our money 2 and 3 times on projects, which is ridiculous.
I don't know so much about that, but running a business, that's how it happens. You do something, oh crap, that's wrong, you gotta do this. You know, you gotta change things, you gotta be able to do that, you gotta be able to flex a little bit, go this way, oh,
You
that's
should
wrong.
be able to do the research first and make sure that you're doing your best thing. You don't just go and say, oh, I'll charge you $10 and like, oh, wow, that was really $1,000 project. Or, oh, I didn't do it right. You do your research first.
You know,
That's why we need to have workshops and things and
I'm a
discuss.
contractor, okay? I go out and I'll bid a job, and we'll start doing the work, and constantly, something happens, hidden damage, whatever. I have to make adjustments for that. Sometimes I have to eat it. Sometimes I can pass it on. You know, you gotta play it day by day, step by step, and as far as having this enormous plan to take care of everything, it'll turn to crap in a heartbeat. There's a bumper sticker that used to be around town, pardon my language, that said, shit happens. And that's exactly what happens in this business, because that's what this is. This is a business that has to be ran, and it has to be taken care of. It has to be nurtured, it has to be fine-tuned, it's gotta be able to be changed.
I know, but so if you send me out to bid one of your jobs, and I go out and bid it, and you say, what the hell were you thinking? You know, 'cause I wouldn't have a clue how to bid your job. You know, so what I'm saying is we need to come together as a council, make sure that the research is done, make sure that we're doing the best possible correct thing. I understand things happen, I'm a computer person, you don't think weird things happen?
I don't know anything about computers.
Well,
I'm sorry.
But I do know how to run a business, and I understand what happens in a business, and this town is no different than any other business, church, whatever it is, it operates the same way.
I hear what both of you are saying, loud and clear.
I agree with it. I agree
I
with
agree with both sides here and there. I mean, I do agree with Bonnie though on the communication, because open enrollment for insurance is the same time every year, same with the budget. So, I mean, I am on board where we should have done our research better in advance. If we knew that this was an issue, we knew that the raises were coming up in the budget, we knew all of that was up for discussion, we could have done a better job getting prices for different insurance. And then also, as Matt even stated, a simple email maybe in advance to our staff and our officers to talk to them, hey, we are in the middle of a pandemic. This is what we're considering. How would you feel about this versus just springing it on them? And that all ties back to the communication. We may not be having this discussion or the police debacle if people talked and if we thought in advance and planned it out. I agree with you. Budget, open enrollment, all of that is the same time every year. We could have been more prepared for this in advance. But then to comment on what you said, I don't necessarily agree with all the time, let's raise the millage rate to, go hand in hand with our raising budget. As a council, that's not necessarily, we shouldn't just raise the taxes all the time. That's not the way to balance the budget correctly. We do need to dive into our expenses and nip it in the bud where it's necessary so we can residents' tax dollars, which is, as residents, I'm sure that's what they voted us up here to do. You know, residents don't vote us to increase their taxes. So I think we need to do a better job budgeting, you know, managing our budget in a more responsible way versus just saying, oh, let's just up the millage rate. I just don't think that's right. And then to just, we're like, just, you know, understand, oh, we'll just do it next year. I just think we're compromising way too much already.
I agree, Rob, what you're saying, business-wise, but when, because I talked with Matthew and I talked with the chief, and one of my big questions was to the chief, well, you did your budget, why didn't you know that what open enrollment was gonna be? That there was gonna be less per officer? And he said that when he does his budget, that town hall just gives him a lump sum of what those benefits are, what health insurance is. So remember, the chief is knowing that the contract is still in with that 920 that they're supposed to have. So he's assuming that that amount of money is covering what the contract says. And that's why when they went to go do it, they found out differently. This is where the miscommunication happened.
Right.
So I'm saying, because we found out in the 11th hour, we have not given the chief or anybody time to figure out, are there other solutions? There are other ways to look at this. The chief didn't even have an opportunity to look at his budget and go, oh, well, now it's gonna be this, then I need to do something different. So I agree, we need to do better at communicating and we need to do better at calculating these numbers, but I don't think it should be at the expense of a person's job.
Oh, no, me neither.
Well, that's what I even said that before. I feel like the raises, that was just one example. We could probably make up the funds there with the, or a decent portion, and then we're not borrowing as much from reserves in that case. So I agree. It is a pandemic. Like I said, people are happy to just be lucky to have jobs. I don't want to throw someone out. I get that. I'm on board with that. I just think there's other ways we could save the money. And I don't necessarily feel comfortable just approving this when, like you said, maybe we need to make this a top priority. And then we can come back and we have.
We're in our first reading, so I know the lawyer has told us we can make changes, but they would have to be,
No, so.
what can we do?
So, especially because we do have newcomers to this process, this, Ferris wheel of Christmas, or whichever analogy we're going with. At this point, the budget process is a 3-step process by statute, basically. Around July, you come up with a proposed millage rate. The millage underlies everything. Under the statute, you have to do millage before you do budget, because one leads to the other, as noted in your comments a moment ago. The next step is the adoption of a tentative budget and a tentative millage rate. That's tonight, that's step 2. And then the final hearing is step 3, where you adopt a final millage and a final budget. Where we are tonight is step 2. Between steps 1 and 2, if you were to increase your millage rate, which is not the discussion you're having, but if that was the discussion you were having, you would have to provide new notice and pay for it and mail it to everybody. That's not what's on the table. Florida Statute 200-065, referenced in all the materials tonight in the resolutions, does contemplate the ability to alter the budget between the tentative and the final.
Right.
So if you were to make you could decide on something tonight, decide differently on the 23rd, which I believe is when your next hearing is noticed. Everybody look to notice from the clerk, not the attorney. But on the occasion of your final hearing, if you reached a different conclusion, you could conceivably do that. However, understand you are in the closing window, and for those of you who have been around this process before, when we get down to that wire, it gets real dicey. You don't want to be in the position where you don't have any vision of where you're going. In as much as you need to have discussions, my strong advice to you would be have them now, reach conclusions in as much as possible, and at least say, if we're not reaching a conclusion, this is the very narrow thing we are working to resolve between now and then, or the very narrow data point, and with that data point, then that will be it. But a broad scale, I would like a comprehensive review of all accounting, like we're just past that point. Best practices, what would have been different, what would have, woulda, shoulda, coulda, aside, we have to appreciate where we are in the process, and we are nearing finality. And so as you make that final lap around the track, which is where we're getting close to, the best thing you can do at this point is, even if it takes long discussions, difficult discussions this evening, even if you plan to be here for 15 minutes, I would strongly encourage you, have meaningful discussions now. Get out your thoughts, get out whatever debate you need to have. This is certainly the venue for it, and that would be my advice to you from legal, especially given the history we've had in this community where we have had impasses, and I'm not suggesting that on a 5-member council or with the dialogue we've had that that's the direction we're going, but the closer you get to October 1, the more difficult things become, and understand that there's also the tension of this process is so specific in statute that it's, for instance, once the notice goes out to the paper, the hearing has to be had in not less than 5 days, but not more than 3, like this whole window. There's like a 48-hour window, so all of these things are tied. It's not as simple as, well, we'll just convene 4 and 5 more times. On some level, you can workshop things to death, and God bless you as you endeavor to make the best informed decision you can. But as far as what you can do tonight, you have a proposed budget before you. That is with a staff, management, administration, however you choose to characterize it, suggestion on how you proceed. Ultimately, you are the body that makes appropriations in the form of the budget you adopt. Have that discussion by all means, reach whatever conclusions need to be reached.
Do I understand that if we were to vote right now, we are voting on the actual numbers that are in the budget, and we would be agreeing to the attrition that if a...
Not necessarily. That is your decision to make. The submission to you is, here are the numbers, because something like the attrition element is not a number, right? That's not a number reflected in
So that's
there.
not a part of that. It's just the way the document is, it was handed to us, borrowing from reserves, and blah, blah, blah.
So the resolution incorporates, the resolution before you, adopting the tentative budget, incorporates the budget. The budget is, think of it as an Excel spreadsheet. The Excel spreadsheet doesn't have policy objectives and all this other stuff. So the budget itself is not a document that has this. However, as part of how do we plan to navigate this budget going forward, management has noted that one way that we intend to navigate that is this proposal. And it would be helpful to gain guidance on that, because that is a direction we, meaning the town, intend to proceed, and your guidance in that regard is helpful. It is somewhat inextricably linked to the budget, but the resolution you're voting on, so you've made a motion, is about the dollars and cents and the line items in the budget, and that is not a dollar and cents allocation reflected in that Excel spreadsheet. And if I misspoke in any way, please correct me.
So the thing is, we approved this budget, and everything that Bonnie was saying, we could go back to, right? I mean, what we're talking about tonight, we're not, we'll be changing a bunch of numbers on the budget, or a bunch of, different things on the budget. We're just going to accept the budget, go to the third step, and then we can police the budget.
Well, no, not necessarily, because I still have questions about the numbers in the budget. Like, so for the town clerk salary, or, the overall salaries for administrative employees went from 53,000 last year up to 73,000. Why is it so much? Why do we have a part-time accountant? Who is this person?
Should have asked that earlier.
Yeah, I guess I thought that would have been when we were going through the tabs.
Well, yeah, but now we don't have enough money, and our town manager's the one that wanted to can somebody for attrition, through attrition.
Well, but what I'm
So,
hearing the
we're looking
lawyers
at the
say,
budget.
that's not even on the table if we pass.
But I feel like correct me if I'm wrong as well, like you said, technically the number, it's technically not, but in a sense it is, because moving forward, the police department the whole town really will continue with the current healthcare coverage, which is the 100%, which is what we were trying to prevent to save money. They will still get the raise, and they will still have the position, which means we will go over budget because Matt's plan did not work out because we cannot make the healthcare changes. So ideally, with Bonnie, we should try to allocate that money now before saying we're just gonna sign off, which means it's coming out of reserves. So, am I correct?
I think everybody's correct. Tonight. No, jokes aside, in a broad sense, yes.
Yeah.
There was a proposal submitted, there was an intended policy proposal that did not pan out. A lot of the things you've described are elements of a contract agreement.
Right.
So it's not like they're still getting this concession, it's something that's been negotiated in contract.
Well, I just meant like.
But characterizations aside, and I don't mean to say that you're demeaning it or anything like that, I'm not trying to imply a connotation. However, where we stand tonight is, the point you're making is, whatever cut it might have been, whether it was healthcare or attrition, the manager is trying to find a way to find somewhere between, he said I think the ultimate shortfall was around 45,000, somewhere north of that to account for and mitigate the amount that actually is taken from reserves. Management has provided an alternative to the original idea of healthcare in the form of attrition. Whether or not you pick something to cut, the current budget contemplates meeting all shortfalls through drawing whatever money is necessary from the reserves. If you, as the stewards of the public trust and members who allocate the funds, feel it necessary to make additional cuts, and there is 3 of you here tonight who are all in agreement as to what that looks like, by all means, proceed and make policy. You are the policy-making body. So you are right in that regard. In the regard of the Vice Mayor's question, could we do all this another night? The idea of policing the budget as you characterize it, or identifying ways that we can be more cost conscious or track costs throughout the year, absolutely, that can always be addressed another time. Management is asking you, if you can avoid kicking this can, please do, because one, whether we make this decision or not, relative to the attrition element, there will be a shortfall. Management is predicting a shortfall. Management is saying we've tried to account for that. This is our idea. If you don't endorse that idea, let us know so that we don't plan that way or act that way. However, please be mindful of the fiscal landscape that we have laid before you. That is the message. I don't think I'm mischaracterizing anything anybody said, but to kind of synthesize it, that's where we're at. So I know it sounds kind of jokey to say you're all right, but in a way, yes, you're all right on something in this. It's how you decide as a body to navigate and resolve it. That's.
And I think I hear you saying that we're targeting, I feel like we're targeting the police department for a shortfall that happened, that had we not done that from the beginning, I don't know we would be targeting the police department. So you're saying to look at salaries. You're looking to where can we get that money and not target
Look
the
at other
police
things.
department.
Do we need to spend that much on the web? Do we need to spend this, I mean, who is
Right.
this part-time accountant? Do we need this here? There's $20,000 right there.
I just felt like the raises, in a sense, or if we could adjust it somehow, if we could do a quick math of maybe let's lower the raises or cut the raises for 1 year to make up the funds. And again, we are in a pandemic, and it is quite a large increase for the raises. And to tag off what Matt said, way earlier in the meeting, if we continue at this rate with every year, new salary increases, we cannot afford to continue operating this way. Mayor Dudley said, we have 6 months in reserve right now when we should have 3. In the grand scheme of things, that sounds fantastic, double what we should have, great. But if we keep at this trend and then say, knock wood, this pandemic continues and our expenses increase, that reserve is gonna deplete super quickly. So I know it's a pain, but I am on board where I think we need to make some kind of adjustment, because I think if we just let all this go, we're just setting a trend for the future that's not gonna look good. I think we need to do the right thing now first to set a good example for our future.
But you've been pulling from reserves that little bit every year, and our notebooks always say we have the 6 months. So I'm assuming our money is invested and we make interest?
We do. We actually invested our money 2 years ago. We moved it from the long-term CDs and put it in the Florida Safe Pool. So prior to the pandemic, that was actually doing very well. So yes, we have it invested and it's accessible for us to gain in the event that we need it. What I'm just looking at is future expenditures, like with the police department, we talked about that. I understand we have a full bore union negotiation to plan for that's starting up next year. It's already been, you know, because our contract, this is the last year of 3 years.
Right.
You follow me?
Mm-hmm.
And the last year is typically just a wage reopener versus a full contract reopener. So, you know, obviously we've been having union negotiations since the spring with their attorney, but, you know, they had originally pushed for a higher rate than what we negotiated for the step increases. Do you follow me?
Mhm.
And we actually tried to keep them low on that, and then it was alluded to during those discussions, well, hey, we have a full reopener next year, and we're going to be looking at entry-level wages, we're gonna be looking at step increases, we're gonna be looking at a number of other things, because we wanna maintain pace with our competition throughout the county. We do know, based upon the past, which is the screening service, that in the city wages for police officers are still, last for the most part, moving forward. So in order to remain competitive with other agencies, we're trying to strategize for those negotiations, which will start next spring, to potentially increase that overall starting wage, whatever that may be and whatever's discussed at that moment. So,
But how many associates are currently fall under that? Because but any other associate that doesn't fall under that contract currently, we could say we do not want to give a pay raise to this year.
correct, that's all sergeants and below. So all the sergeants and then all the rank and file officers. So theoretically, 3 sergeants and 9 officers. So
there's
lieutenant,
12 associates that already have their pay that was negotiated.
right,
And so that was negotiated in the email that I read earlier at 0.5%. So nobody should get any more than that.
okay, so just for clarification, they have 2% now between the steps, so it was to go from 2% to 2.5%. They originally wanted 3, and then we proposed the 2.5, they countered at 2.75, and I held fast to the 2.5, just because of everything else that's going on.
And to clarify, that's not an entitlement, that is one of the things you approved in the budget, that 0.5. The PDA is actively voting on that. I've not received a tally of that number. It was a unanimous vote. I was not aware of that yet. However, that still remains subject to town council approval. That's not, again, as the policymaking body who makes allocations, all of these things are at your feet. And I don't say that to say, hey, here's something specific to hone in on. I'm just letting you know, as a function of process, you are the policymakers in this town.
Well, the only reason I did hone in on that is because we cannot adjust the healthcare, and we wanna keep the positions to, keep our officers fully staffed and keep them happy with their jobs. So, and I just feel like the staff and the officers, I feel like, just everyone, I feel like is understanding right now of the time period, and
So you're saying no raises to anyone?
No, she's saying to try and come up with some money we don't know.
if
what
we
those
could
numbers
cut
are.
some raises, sure. And to be fair, if we need to do it across the board, whether that be a base percentage, then I'm down with that as well. I'm not
It'd
saying
have
let's
to be
only
everybody,
take,
wouldn't you think?
yes,
You couldn't say
anybody who's getting a raise gets included in what I'm saying.
on the wage freeze, and that includes the police department. Can you
And
do
that's
that?
what I'm not,
With negotiations?
No.
because that's contract, there's nothing we can do about the contract.
These are non-union employees.
So then we would be taking our non-union people and not giving them a raise, and taking the people who are union and giving them a raise?
I think something's being lost in precision here, so allow me to clarify a point. There is a built-in increase within the contract. Beyond that, there was a negotiation of going from that built-in 2% and making it 2.5. The 0.5 that I'm referencing is something that you can address. That 0.5 affects union employees, in this case your union being the Police Benevolent Association, which covers 90% of what you understand to be your officers, 12 of the 14. So what Councilmember Zemitis is talking about is whatever that 0.5 looks like for those 12 of 14, and anybody else in the budget, meaning the remainder of the regular, non-sworn employees of the town, any perceived wage increase beyond that which is a contract entitlement would be frozen in this arrangement. That is what Councilmember Zelitis is discussing.
Thank you.
So how much money does that
He,
come up to?
he knows me, he knows what I'm trying to say, yes.
And how much does that come up to?
Yeah, how much are we
That
saving?
would be
if we
the
did that?
calculation of what does that come up with?
We can calculate that. The scenario though that we had originally proposed in the budget was everyone under 50,000 was getting a 3% increase, and then anyone over that, not including the manager, was getting a 1%. We can calculate that for the rest of the employees. That obviously didn't take into account the 2.5% for the police officers, the sworn officers, which are sergeants and below. But we can come up with that calculation. My guess is in total it's going to be under $10,000.
Under
Across the board.
10,000
Under
for
10,000
everybody?
for everybody.
So, and who is this part-time and accountant?
We have a part-time accountant that's a CPA that works with the town to help us with our financing, our billing, et cetera. Works very closely with the clerk.
And that's over and above our auditors?
Yes, absolutely.
It's a distinct service.
Yeah.
And I know you guys shook your head at the $10,000, but that is a step in the budget. That could be step one, and then we make additional cuts along the way. So I don't think that was just our answer, like, woo, there's the 50,000, problem solved. I think, okay, now we're a fifth of the way there.
Ronnie asked the question about the website. He said he had 6,000 and it's budgeted 12,000.
Well, yeah, I think it's gonna be requested, hopefully, we're
It's,
up.
it's,
So-
well, it was just, it's a brand new website.
Okay, so what would be the repercussions of going back to the 6,000 for the website? Is it because it's new and we have to do this 12,000?
Okay, that's a good question. Per the detailed expenses, when we originally bought the website, because we didn't have all the money in the overall budget for 1 year, we split it over 2 years. So a portion of that pays for the balance of the initial website cost.
How much was that website?
Yeah, it was like 10 or 12,000.
And
Why?
just added context to that was, there was a political, legal, cultural moment in the last 2 years where especially local governments became the target of litigation based on the ADA accessibility, and I know you're familiar with this, but the ADA accessibility of their websites and the material hosted thereon, so not just the website, but are your PDFs and all these things accessible. I don't know the budget allocation, I don't involve myself in that, but I just, as added context, one of the large costs that several communities undertook was trying to migrate a system that was intended to be bare bones, here's data, and make it, here's data in an accessible way for all residents and members of the public.
So again, you know, I'll go back to the communication thing. What research was done? Was it third-party software you could have put on the old website that would have been cheaper? We're not spending our money correctly.
That was back in several prior budget years. We piggybacked on a contract with another agency. This particular website hosting entity has provided that service through probably 60% of the other municipalities in Pinellas County, but we had to do that to maintain our compliance. The additional costs that are in the website line item are for the audio line
You
component
didn't answer
that,
my question, but go ahead.
yeah, that Ms. Noble had suggested that we consider that enables a visually impaired person to go to the website and click on this audio live function, and it automatically amplifies everything on the website to enable them to be able to see it better. That was an additional a la carte cost, and then we had an additional cost in there for a recreation management software that would help us with booking of our facilities, parking tickets, Rec Track, I believe is what the software was called, to be able to just provide more efficiency in the way that we book and manage and track
when we approve that, that's what we're doing. We should be, as council members, looking at that.
Well, can I get it in an Excel spreadsheet, for goodness sakes? You know how hard it is to go through that PDF? I've asked for that before. I mean, and it could be a little easier because here's our expenditures should line up with the budget.
You mean the one that we get monthly?
Yep,
We can do that.
it's much easier to look at it in an Excel spreadsheet instead of pages and pages of stuff. Oh, here's a expenditure, and take a ruler and draw it over.
I just know pretty much when you look at it, our estimates are pretty close, and it is just a guide, you don't have to stick to it, to the Bible. And that's why it'll show that we borrow X number of dollars from reserve, and in the end of the year, we don't, because each line item is not exact. We don't, it's just a guide, it's an estimate.
Does anyone have a better way to oversee expenditures and understand what we're spending our money on?
Just a daily basis.
As you said, just watch each month and see what the expenditures are, make your comments, feel free. That's what we hired him for, and then that's what we're supposed to do, is ask questions. You're asking questions, that's fine, but you're trying to micromanage a little too much, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, I don't wanna say the obvious, but it's like for instance, you know, I don't wanna get the email out from the attorney and ask why in our front page, it says that this was negotiated about the insurance, and there was nothing said in the negotiations about the insurance, and that's right from the other attorney. So I'm asking questions, I don't get the correct answers, so I just don't wanna be told something like we were in writing. In this, saying that we talked about the insurance and it wasn't talked about.
And
So
that's-
now, what leg do I have to go on in believing anything that I'm told? It's like people just make stuff up.
But I think that's why we need to take the budget that we have, and
Work
we
it.
need to vote and approve it, and then we need to move forward and, you know,
I
we
second
need to
that.
monitor it monthly, and I guess, can I call it to a vote?
I would.
We've got to put it out to public. Did we have?
What, I
public
need to
comment?
do that, I need to do
Do
that.
we need to put it out to
So-
public comment?
I'll open it for public comment.
Do I have to go up with?
Yes.
Just because the mic and it's
Yeah.
presently being streamed, so if you could provide your name and address.
Vernon Howell, 493156 Way North, Tennessee. I'm hearing all of you, and as with everybody has good ideas, differences of opinion. But what I'm hearing, Wanda saying, and granted, and I will give her that, as everybody in here, I don't know anybody that's spent any more time on council in this town than you do. You have. You're at an impasse as far as who believes what, who's disgruntled with what. And as the attorney's already told you, you can move on, you can make adjustments to the year, through the year. I appreciate what each one of you is putting in. That's what my tax dollars, whether I live with that guy or not, it's my tax dollars too, and that's what I pay for. What I would like to say as the audience, can we just agree right now to agree, as Wanda said? Get it passed. We're not gonna go bankrupt out of what we're taking out of reserves. I know from sitting out here year after year, exactly what you're saying, that at the end of the year, many times, we didn't spend it, it goes back in. So let's be a little bit optimistic instead of pessimistic, and, try not doing any personal attacks. Everybody's trying to do their job as well as they can. I like to give everybody the benefit of the doubt. And just get it done, agree,
is for the budget, is the second reading thing, right?
Yeah,
This is the,
That's
this
the
is
first
the,
reading.
well, so a resolution is only done on one reading, so there's not a first and second. But this is for the tentative budget, the final budget hearing, again, I believe is scheduled for September 23rd, 2020. Same bat time, same bat place. So that would be the final. Things can change between now and then, as it relates to the budget specifically.
Can I just ask a question before we move?
You just did it. You
Yes,
made it.
yes,
Second question.
you may.
I, wanted to ask me prior before, but, with all the discussion, I think it got lost in the
Okay.
noise. Yes, I would feel comfortable if we eliminated that extra 0.5% increase that we're giving that's not in the contract, so we can adjust that and then do it across the board. And if it saves 10,000 and it's at least a little less from reserves, and I do think with I would vote yes then if we included that, but I just think we're just giving.
Whose wages are you wanting to cut?
No, what we said before, it would be a town-wide, from my understanding, again, the police department are contracted for a 2% raise. We cannot touch that, that's fine. But as a council, in our budget, we included an additional 0.5%. So instead of 2%, it's a 2.5%. Other staff members in the town as well are receiving raises. So I was recommending that 0.5 increase, since that's all we can adjust from the police department. I was saying make that a widespread town staff initiative. Okay.
Are they gonna accept that?
It's not, it's,
Wait a minute, can I clarify?
yes,
The PBA is a union, and basically the previous union negotiations that were recommended were to go from the 2 to the 2.5% for just the sworn officers. You follow me?
yeah, we were,
Okay, but you had asked a question.
That's already been negotiated.
right.
Right, that was previously negotiated, but it's not final until it's, the recommendation of that has always been included in the budget document moving forward. Now, if we get to the budget discussions, the workshops, et cetera, and the council says, well, I think as a whole, 2.5 is a little lenient, I think we need to do 3.5, for instance, then basically that's when council collaborates at a workshop and says, manager, I think we need to communicate X to the overall PBA from that standpoint. When we went to the workshop 1 and workshop 2, it was always the 2.5 and the detail of expenses. So theoretically, it's going from the 2, which is negotiated out. So we would have had the budget for 2 no matter what, to the 2.5.
Right. But as we said before, we just did not anticipate not being able to make that healthcare change.
Exactly.
So I'm saying I feel like that's a good compromise.
And it is. And you'd asked about, can I answer a question that someone asked about what the wage increases are with the 3%, the 1%? It's basically, in total, including that administrative, general government increase, it was 27, but for that administrative position, that was to make the part-time student intern, bumping that person up to a full-time person. Without that, it was $6,254 for all existing employees. Does that make sense? And that was the 3% for everyone under 50, and then the 1% for most people over 50.
I just think that what Fran said, positive thinking and just move forward with what we have.
Yeah, because we might change our minds on that 100%, and the people that are, our employees, it's hard to not give them any money and give these people money and not give these people any money and then give these people extra money and still not give these people any money. We could have it all set up and change our minds at any time. Is that not correct? At any time, we could say, well, let's give the office administration people their raise now, because things have gotten better.
If the money's in the budget
If
to
the
be able
money-
to do that, then why you don't typically adjust wages downward is due to compression, whether that's with the police department or with overall regular employees, but with the overall pandemic, you know, freezing wages, you know, we were recommending very, very minor wage increases to begin with, but, you know, it's not something that can't be done, because that was my philosophy early on, was my thought process entering the budget was, hey, we all still have a job. You know, we should strive to, you know, continue to do what we're doing without the wage adjustments. But then I collaborated with my other managers, and, you know, their wage adjustments are across the board, but they also have more reserves to pull from, et cetera, in order to do that. We don't have that flexibility or benefit.
There was no raise in there for you, was there?
No, sir. I have not put that in for 2 years. That's entirely up to the council. I like to stay out of those discussions entirely. I don't want to be part of the problem more than I already am. So.
I think that percent that Megan is saying, it seems small when you're talking about the officers, but that could be big to those that are at the other end with only 1%, and you're taking something away.
Yeah.
And then I think if you omit them and just do the officers, then I feel like we're
Picking.
pointing fingers and
Yeah.
picking on people, so
It's either all or nothing, I would think.
right, yeah.
So the current motion on the floor is to approve the resolution and the budget as incorporated therein in its current form. There's a motion and a second. Thus far, there's been no further motions to amend or otherwise revisit that,
Yeah.
and that's where we stand procedurally.
Should take a vote.
All right. Vote on
All in
that.
favor?
Councilmember Noble?
Yes.
Councilmember Myers?
Sure.
Mayor Dudley?
Yes.
Councilmember Hogg?
Thank
Councilmember
you.
Hogg?
I'm meditating.
Meditate.
Yes. Yes.
The tentative budget stands.
And I want to agree with Bonnie.
I know, I was just gonna say, I do think we need to move forward. Go ahead, say it.
Yeah, yeah, we need to watch where our money's going, we need to discuss it, you know, so on and so forth, but you gotta start at square one. We're at square one, let's move to square two and figure out what we can do, because that's our job.
I'm just bringing up.
No, I do, I think it was really good things that we did, and I think you guys now got yourself your feet wet, and then as you go through, it's gonna be easier next year.
If I may, procedurally, you've adopted a tentative budget and you've adopted your tentative millage rate, which shall remain unchanged going forward.
Correct.
As it relates to the budget, the management and administration came to you with a proposal on a policy side, which was not resolved to finality, and that's fine, because even if you resolved it to finality tonight, you could have changed your mind in 2 weeks at the final. My strong suggestion to you as a council is, while remaining entirely respectful of the Sunshine Law and all your obligations as public officials, if you need to have discussions with administration, management, staff, whomever, between now and then, so that you can be in a better position to at least give guidance to the town administration and the stewards of the town on a day-to-day basis, I would encourage you to do that between now and then, both to give predictability to the to management as it tries to figure out how to navigate its fiscal landscape, but also to any and all persons that any changes to the budget might impact. And so as you go forward, please give that some consideration. And that's some legal / prudence advice at this point.
I make a motion to
May I
adjourn.
make a request or motion, whatever I have to do? This, what is it called? Letter from the town manager, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The 6th paragraph needs to go. It's not even true. It just needs to go. Can you rewrite this?
Second page.
The 6th
wanna do it anyway, so.
Which one are you talking
Second
about?
page, second page. Where you start highlighting it, where they're,
Well, right, yeah, I mean, it talks about the healthcare changes, yet no one was actually made aware until yesterday, we're not allowed to do that anyway, so,
Yeah.
right,
That needs to come out.
right.
We can do that.
okay, I need a motion to adjourn.
Mayor,
No.
just for what it's worth, there is a comment
Oh,
section
yes,
on the
there is,
agenda.
you're right, I'm sorry.
I'm that guy.
Okay.
That's not it, Megan, I'm that guy. Just let me get to go home.
I'm a talker,
All right, Bonnie, what do you wanna say?
she's contributing.
Okay, she's done, maybe.
Yeah, let's start that in.
Just final comment, yes, we need to do better in the future, and communication, I mean, if we just need to have a workshop on communication as a whole, and what that means to us, and how we can move forward, and what our expectations are, I think that would be a great step one for us, because every meeting, that is a complaint. No matter what we're talking about, it's always along the lines of communication, so I really think, if we're gonna do better, and if we're gonna make changes for the future, there's nothing we can do about this one, okay, I get that. I think we need to start there.
In addition, prioritize our projects, our capital projects or any of that. We need to prioritize those as a council. That needs to be our choice, what we wanna do, you know? And we need to figure out what we wanna do for the community. And that's it.
Okay. Larry?
Do I make my motion?
No, I'm not, Larry.
Oh. The only thing I would like to say
Okay.
is everybody on this council probably needs to, work on their mathematics a little bit, percentages specifically, to understand what we're talking about with 8%. Whether it's a big number or small, 3% of a million versus 3%. I think you guys all need to work on that, have a better understanding, because I've seen a little bit of a flaw in the thought processes sometimes in what we're focusing on.
Okay. Vice Mayor?
I'm done.
You're done, Manager Campbell?
No, ma'am, I have nothing else. We will move forward to the next hearing accordingly, and we'll start strategizing for that first workshop, talk about capital projects,
Okay.
and prioritization and expectations, and we'll be able to get the actual financials in an Excel format, to council members versus the PDF.
Okay.
Can we do that?
Pick this up there, but I think so.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Attorney Mark?
Nothing except ask the clerk to announce the next and final budget hearing.
The final budget hearing will be September 23rd at 6:30 PM.
Okay. Motion to adjourn.
I would like to make the motion to adjourn.
Need a second?
Oh, come on.
Second.